navigating the issues that matter to you. It's Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Trailing in the polls, but in relatively friendly territory, it was time for the Poilievre campaign to bring out the big guy. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, co-founder of the modern Conservative Party of Canada, took to the stage at Pierre Poilievre's rally in Edmonton last night. Big crowd on hand. Estimates range from 12 to 15,000 people in attendance. And Harper made it clear who he thinks should be the next Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre.
We will only get there with leadership from a person who has an actual policy plan, from a person who has been right on all the big issues for a decade, and a person who has the energy and, yes, the youth to take us forward into a better, stronger, and more united future. That person has been my colleague, he is my friend, he is our leader, and he is the next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, and Anna.
Harper also has some words for the new Liberal leader and Prime Minister Mark Carney, who was the governor of the Bank of Canada during much of Harper's time in office.
And by the way, I say that as the guy who actually did lead Canada through the global financial crisis. I hear there's someone else claiming it was him. It was, of course, our government, the late, great Jim Flaherty, and our Conservative team who were responsible for the day-to-day macroeconomic management during that challenging time.
Harper would go on to say that many of the problems facing Canada right now have nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Declining employment and housing opportunities, rising crime, the growing divisions between our regions and our people. These were not created by Donald Trump. They were created by the policies of three Liberal terms, policies that the present Prime Minister supported and wants a fourth Liberal term to continue.
Well, Poilievre and Harper packed them in Edmonton. The Carney campaign had a sizable rally of its own in Richmond, BC, a crowd in the thousands. Carney said when he sees something that's not working, he fixes it. That's why he canceled the carbon tax.
Well, it was good on paper. The consumer carbon tax had become too divisive, so we eliminated it on day one. You might have noticed last week, up to 18 cents a litre off at the pump. The right time.
He also went on the attack against his main rival, Pierre Poilievre.
In 9 days, while we were formally in government, we did more than Pierre Poilievre has imagined in all his decades in politics. Yeah. And that's if he had an imagination and didn't just mimic Donald Trump.
That was not the only time Carney likened Poilievre to Trump, as he asked supporters for a strong Liberal majority government.
I have seen this movie before. Pierre Poilievre is that type of lifelong politician who worships at the altar of the free market despite never having actually worked in the private sector or made a payroll. And it's all so simple. It's all so simple. You have a reflex to cut and destroy. And so while President Trump's plan is to divide and conquer, Pierre Poilievre's plan is to divide and be conquered.
Someone else weighing into the federal election campaign, the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, who had did not take kindly to being ridiculed by Mark Carney at a Carney campaign event in Victoria, British Columbia a couple of nights ago.
Well, I've noticed this with progressive men, how much they talk about how much they support women until they meet a strong conservative woman. And so this is a pretty consistent type of approach that I've seen, not only from the current Prime Minister, but the former one as well. And the attitude is, sit down and shut up. Well, I don't shut up. I make sure that Albertans know exactly how I feel about issues, and I'm going to continue advocating on behalf of my province, whether he likes it or not.
No fewer than 5 new polls dropped today. They all show a Liberal lead. Research Co. says it's the Liberals with an 8-point lead. Liaison says the Liberals have a 6-point lead. Innovative Research also has the Liberals up by 6 points. Nanos says it's a 5-point lead for the Liberals, while Main Street Research says it is a 4-point lead for the Liberal Party. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
Please back for his weekly take on the big issues of the day. Trade will be the focus today for us with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Great to hear from you.
Good afternoon, Rob.
So about a week ago, just prior to Donald Trump's so-called Liberation Day, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative released a report on all the trade irritants that the United States has with all of these countries all over the world. There's a whole section just dealing with Canada. Starts on page 40 of this 400-page report. Big ones seem to be supply management and online digital services. Why don't we go through some of these? What stands out for you, Professor?
Supply management. It's funny. Not funny. I mean, it's interesting. It's very trivial to both sides. Let me be very clear. There's 8,500 dairy farmers out of 40 million Canadians, and they're producing milk. And milk and agriculture is 2%. All of agriculture in the U.S. is 2% of GDP. If you just drill down to dairy, it's an infinitesimally tiny amount, and it's overwhelmingly in Wisconsin. That's where most of the dairy cows are located. But it is, I think it's become so symbolic, if you will. It's been on the USTR's list long as I can remember, going back to the 1990s. It's always been an irritant, probably because dairy farmers are vocal on both sides of the border. In fact, other countries around the world, farmers have always been vocal about subsidies and competition and that sort of thing. And so it's just one of those things that it's terribly destructive to ordinary people because it doubles the average price of milk and eggs and poultry. But from a macro perspective, it isn't worth a hill of beans. But it's very symbolic to both sides. And we've dug in. All three parties have said, no way will we ever give it up. Yeah. And Trump and the USTR has put it at the top of the list.
I mean, they call it non-negotiable. All the party leaders are saying, no, it's non-negotiable. Supply management is non-negotiable in Canada. I mean, if you're going into a negotiation, do you really say things are non-negotiable? Maybe you do. I don't know.
Hang on. I would make this argument. Again, it's sort of very Kissingerian. If you're going to die on a hill, and that's a metaphor, of course. Sure. You want to die on a hill for something really, really big, like enormous, gigantic, humongous. This is not gigantic, enormous, humongous. There's 8,500 dairy farmers. And a lot of people don't even drink dairy milk anymore. There's all kinds of, in fact, one of the reasons that milk consumption has declined so much is people are switching to soy and oatmeal milk and almond milk, et cetera, et cetera. And again, milk is only a small subset of agriculture and food. Okay, but so, it's to say it's non-negotiable, and I understand people who say, you don't understand, it's about politics. 8,500 voters? Mm-hmm. Over 30 ridings? It's so infinitesimally tiny.
Concentrated in Quebec as well. Concentrated in Quebec.
Eastern Ontario and West Quebec. Eastern Ontario, the rural, votes Conservative and has voted for Conservatives since 1867. I don't think they're going to lose the rural. The Conservatives are going to lose the rural. In Quebec, they're not voting for the Conservative Party. Of course, they vote for the Bloc or the Liberal Party. Well, Fortress Quebec. I mean, they're not going to form or not form the government because of 8,000 dairy farmers.
Right. But what they don't want is, but I can tell you, Professor, what they don't want is a farmers' protest on Parliament Hill that would put the Freedom Convoy to shame.
Rob,
right?
I think you just nailed it. I really do. I think it's when you look at the economics of it, it's so unbelievably tiny and trivial. And then I was thinking about this. It's the optics of having 1,000 dairy farmers drive onto the hill or drive right beside the hill with tractors, shades of the truckers' protest.
Exactly.
And I think you're right. I think it's because the farmers are prone to be very vocal in their protests, and they've got big equipment that make great pictures on television, by the way, great big honking tractors and pictures. They can herd dairy cows down the street of Wellington.
I don't know, like dumping milk on Parliament Hill or something like that,
but
Professor.
You're right.
Yeah. So as I said, I mean, that's the first two things on the list is supply management. Supply management and milk classes, like right up there on the list. And then as well on the list, you go down a little bit and it's online streaming and the digital services tax, which are there to defend our cultural industries, something else that our political leaders are saying are non-negotiable. What do you think?
I think there's some of this that's, when I say politics, I mean it's not even, they're just playing games. Cultural industries has never been in any free trade agreement. In countries around the world, the cultural industries have always been exempted. So why are the leaders standing up there saying, I'm going to be tough as nails on cultural industries? They're just grandstanding. The Americans never asked us to give up the CBC. They didn't. They never said don't protect cultural industries. They're, on supply management, that's a different issue. The Americans are demanding it be done away with. The Americans have never asked us to give up on cultural industries, so that's a straw man. It's a fake argument, as if.
But they don't like the digital services tax.
No,
they don't like the digital services tax, though.
They don't. Oh, listen, that one's big. That one is really big, and I want to make it a larger issue. We just can't go in and say, look, there's all kinds of things that you want that we're not going to negotiate, because then we're not going to have a deal. So we're going to have to decide trade-offs. What are we willing to trade off? What do we want to die on the hill for? If we want to die on the hill for supply management, well, then are we going to give up, for example, the digital service tax on the tech giants, on Google and Meta and so forth? I don't suggest I have the answer, but I'm saying we're going to have to give up some of these things if we want a deal.
Okay. When we come back, we'll pick apart some more of this report. I mean, for example, they don't like that in a lot of provinces, the government runs all the liquor stores. They think that's a barrier to entry for American spirits makers. And as well, some interesting things that are in this report. What do the Americans want is the key question. And we're getting some answers today from Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
We're back with Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. We've been talking about this report from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. It was released just prior to the Liberation Day event of Donald Trump. The Americans don't like that the government runs many of the liquor stores in Canadian provinces. You don't think that could lead to some liberalization of the sale of spirits in Canada, do you?
Rob, I'm not here to defend Trump, okay? I'm trying to constantly try and explain what the logic is. And sometimes there is a logic and sometimes there isn't a logic.
Yeah.
With the liquor stores, I understand their argument. And I've been doing a lot of research lately on something I've talked about literally for 35 years. And that's this whole idea of protectionism. And people say, what's free trade agreements think of it as a long continuum, a line. Well, at one extreme end is free trade, where there's no restrictions on foreign investment, foreign competition, or anything. No tariffs, no non-tariff barriers, nothing. At the other end is all kinds of protectionism. It's not only tariffs. You can have non-tariff barriers. You can say that the environmental standards, we're going to have environmental standards, and they're going to be tougher or more stringent on foreign companies than domestic. That's an example of a non-tariff barrier. Okay, let me get to the point. The liquor stores have been doing all kinds of protectionism, but it doesn't show up anywhere in any contract as such. the liquor stores, the provincial government-owned liquor stores, have been very deliberately sourcing much more domestic wines and products, beers, and etc. I didn't say they don't buy any, but they there's a bias toward both in the pricing and the procurement towards domestically produced alcohol products. Okay. And so the Americans say, hey, that's protectionism. Just let the free market decide. Let individuals decide if they want to buy California wine or New Zealand wine or Canadian wine, not the Liquor Control Board. And they have a point.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because people were wondering, well, why is Premier Smith saying we have to do something about the zero plastic waste agenda? Is that just Premier Smith going off, doing her own thing, going rogue? Premier Smith in Alberta, but it's actually in the report. They're saying, you're compromising food safety, you're increasing food loss and waste, you're restricting U.S. agricultural exports because in many instances there aren't viable alternatives to plastics packaging. Interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is an example where it gets even more gray. And I really mean that because I understand the arguments on both sides. I don't agree with the arguments on both sides. The environmentalists are saying, oh my God, plastic's terrible, terrible, terrible. And you know that. We're all, we got to ban single-use straws. We got to ban plastic. And people like Daniel Smith or me are saying, look, this is just driven by ideology. It is. It's driven by anti-business, anti-plastic, anti-oil and gas, because plastic is a derivative of petrochemical products. That's where it comes from. The plastic comes from petrochemicals. And so this is just another way of the environmental movement going after the oil companies that they hate. And people like Smith and the grocery products people are saying, look, I had out the CEO of, won't name his name, but of a very well-known grocery store. And he said, food, the only food that, you can only keep food safe that's not frozen in plastic. He said you can't wrap raw fish in a piece of newspaper and keep it on the shelf in the store, for a day or 2 or 3 or 5 days. And he said plastic is the only thing that is absolutely impermeable by bacteria and stuff. And he said if we started wrapping not frozen food but fresh food and not using plastic, he said listeria would come into the system very, very quickly. And so this is an example again where ideology, I think, is trumping science. And so but some could say it's a barrier to trade too.
Okay. Very interesting. I'm glad we could go through that and maybe just shine some light on, what is it that is angering this Trump administration so much that they would impose these tariffs. Okay, only 20 seconds.
It's protectionism writ large, that there's this philosophy of protectionism that is geared, they think there's a strong, in the protectionism, there's a strong focus on the United States to use this protectionism as a tool to discriminate against American competitors. I think that's their problem.
Okay. All right, good to hear from you this week. We'll speak next week.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Right, bye.
Professor Ian Lee, Associate Professor at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University in Ottawa. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio. The Newsday Panel.
And we have assembled our Newsday panel for today. It includes Kate Harrison, who is Vice Chair at Summa Strategies. Welcome back, Kate Harrison.
Good to be here, Rob. How are you?
And I'm great, thank you. Well, the weather could be better, of course. Nick McRoberts is here with Hill and Knowlton. Good to hear from you.
You too, Rob. How are you doing?
Yeah. Yep. Let's get going. So, big crowd at the Polyev rally last night in Edmonton. Not unexpected, but wow, big crowd. I mean, 15,000 people. Much has been made of the size of the crowds at the Pierre Poilievre rallies. And Pierre Poilievre himself likes to make a point of pointing out how big the rally crowds are. Let's take, for example, this from the hustings today. A question from the Globe and Mail's Laura Stone for Pierre Poilievre.
I actually want to know about your rallies and what your strategy is and who you're talking to, because you bring up things like woke mob, Century Initiative, bulldozing the CBC. I'm exaggerating, but getting rid of CBC HQ. At what point are you just talking in an echo chamber to people who already feel that way, or do you feel like these are broadening the tent of support to Liberal or undecided voters to get them on board with your campaign?
I think it's pretty broad. I think how many people do you think we had last night?
Thousands.
Well, that's pretty obvious. I think you can be more precise than that.
I don't. I mean, the party said 10,000 registered. There's reports of 15. I really can't say.
One last question. When was the last time we had a rally that big in Canada?
I don't know. I've never been to a political rally that big, I don't think.
You know a lot about politics.
Well,
You're a very well-informed person. I know that if there were a bigger rally than that, you would know about it. I think so.
Okay.
But
right.
I think it was pretty incredible.
Okay. It was his biggest rally yet, but let me ask you this. Here's what it comes down to for me, because I'm getting a lot of calls about this versus the polls versus the crowd sizes. I mean, there's a disconnect here. If you were running an election campaign, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a big crowd at a rally or a 6-point lead in the polls? Kate Harrison.
Can I choose option C and say both? Is that
okay?
a possibility?
Okay,
No.
yeah, right. So that'd be the perfect world, I guess.
I wouldn't want a 6-point lead in the polls at this juncture. Actually, I think maybe
Really?
2 or 3 points, because I think you want to keep your voters pretty motivated. And I gather from my friends on the Liberal side that there is some concern that Mr. Carney is peaking too early in some of those public opinion polls. And if people think that this is a shoe-in or something, that may actually hurt some of their voter strategies in terms of polling their vote. I think just to the rally specifically, Rob, this does demonstrate some type of groundswell and support for Mr. Poilievre. You have to be fairly engaged to want to go to one of these things, particularly when there are hours-long waits. There is no cell service in a lot of cases because they're so overrun by how many people are being there. And I think that we should not ignore what a motivating message Mr. Poilievre has for so many people, and they're taking the time out of their day to go do this. What we won't know until Election Day is how that translates to polling the vote. What we know based on history is that older Canadians always vote. I see a lot of older Canadians at Mr. Carney's events. I don't see as many at Mr. Poilievre's events. I think it's a pretty diverse group that go to this. So the big challenge for the Conservatives, how do you take a message that is clearly resonant with a lot of people, including a lot of non-voters, and turn that into a voter ID strategy that pulls people out to the polls? This is going to be the big operational test that the Conservatives have over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Do you want what's behind curtain number C as well, Nick, or what? I mean, what would you rather have? A big crowd at a rally, or a 6-point lead in the polls?
Well, I think that the lead in the polls is the better option, simply because it comes from engaging Canadians and members that may not traditionally vote for your party. To get to the main point of that question that the leader of the opposition didn't answer, is that he's only speaking at those rallies to his base. He's in a safe conservative area in Alberta, speaking to his base and sharing messages that is kind of red meat for Conservatives. What a 6-point lead in the polls points to is that your message is resonating with a broader section of the voter base than you might traditionally receive. So for the Conservatives, I think it's good to see your base out and activated. But for Liberals, our base is out and activated on doorsteps and getting people out to the polls and getting people out to vote and getting their voting plan. And that's ultimately what it comes down to come April 28th. Okay.
So look, when we come back, what I want to talk about is the Trump issue, which has been the dominant issue for the first 2+ weeks of this campaign. 3 weeks to go. Is that going to fade more into the background in the remaining time that we have in this election campaign? And could other issues come more into the foreground? And if that's the case, who gets the advantage. We're back. It's our Newsday panel. Kate Harrison, Vice Chair, Summa Strategies. Nick McRoberts is back with us as well. He's with Hill and Knowlton. In an editorial today, the Globe and Mail suggests that there is still time in this campaign for the Trump narrative to dissipate, that it has been largely a single issue campaign so far. That should fade now, and other issues should come to the fore. Nick, what do you think of that? Do you think the Trump narrative will dissipate?
I don't think so. It's hard for me to think of a steel worker in Hamilton or an auto worker in Windsor whose industries are still affected by tariffs and say to them that it's not it's not a campaign issue. And I think Canadians as a whole have been very good at recognizing that these industries are impacted and that other Canadians are impacted. I think as Canadians look at their retirement savings, they're still being very mindful of that. And we hear news today from the White House that the tariffs in China are going up over 100%. I think that it's still going to continue to be very top of mind for Canadians, and it's not going away in the next 3 weeks for sure.
Okay, what do you think, Kate?
I think the Liberals very much want this to remain this singular focus of media coverage and of concern for those that are voting for them, because the alternative would be taking a really hard look at the last 9 years and trying to defend the record. And you see Mark Carney really running away from that in a lot of cases. He's, because of the campaign, changed his view on the carbon tax, because of the campaign, changed his view on capital gains tax. So I think that they want Trump to remain the focus because he's a lovely foil for all of Canada's problems at the moment. Nothing to see here. The last 9 years didn't really matter all so much if you're Mark Carney. So I think that in this scenario where we have some stability and understanding on tariffs in terms of what's being applied, and if Trump goes quiet, I think there's a chance that a lot of Canadians will start to think about what we need to be doing medium and long term to secure the economy. They might be thinking a little bit more about immigration. They might be thinking a little bit more, especially at tax time, around who's best positioned to lead on cost and affordability issues. So, it's hard to predict what that focus is. I would say that it depends on who you ask, Rob. If you ask millennials and Gen Xers and Zennials what their key concern is, it is cost of living and affordability. It's older Canadians that tend to care about Trump. So I think that there's an opportunity in the weeks ahead, and I wouldn't be waiting for the debates, but I think there's an opportunity in the next 10 to 12 days to really refocus the question on what we need to be doing longer term and to make sure Canada is economically resilient, and exposing a lot of the Liberal hypocrisy on what they would do. And I would point to energy resources as one example of several where they will have to twist themselves in knots to not run away from their record, and how they would propose a real change alternative on some of these things. Any response there, Nick?
I think that it's not necessarily fair to say that Liberals want this, right? I don't think any Liberal wants economic uncertainty in the country or Trump to look at these industries within his targets. And Mark Carney has been clear that in wanting to build Canada, it's about owning our own future, and it's about owning the resources that we have and the talent that we have, and ensuring that our economy can survive despite Donald Trump and not because of him. Liberals are coming at this from much the same way as Kate's mentioning, and it comes down to Canadians on who they think is the best leader to do that.
I guess when I was thinking about this, will the Trump narrative dissipate, Nick? One of the things I was thinking is, well, not if the Liberals have anything to say about it. They don't want the Trump narrative to dissipate.
Sure, but the reason that the Liberals are talking about Trump so much is that it's having a direct effect on affordability, right? I mentioned retirement savings. I mentioned auto jobs and steel jobs. It is having a direct impact on Canadians. That's the reason it's being brought up so much. Maybe not because it's politically expedient, but because that is the issue of the day. I'm in that younger generation of voters, and affordability is an absolute cost. Like, it's a ballot question for me when I look at wanting to buy a house or long-term savings or anything like that. And I can make the direct link between affordability in Canada and what Donald Trump is doing to a global economy. And I think voters are able to do that as well. There's a much clearer link here than conservatives would want to make.
No, but the economy was weak before, Nick.
Yep.
Just really quickly, the economy was weak before Trump and tariffs. Mark Carney said that in the Liberal leadership debates. I think, Trump is a convenient boogeyman for Liberals that want to whisk away all of the problems that they helped to create. Donald Trump is not the reason why half of Canadians are less than $200 away each month from being able to pay their bills. Donald Trump is not the reason why Canada has the worst housing inflation in the G7. Donald Trump is not the reason we've had the lowest economic growth in the OECD. That's because of the Liberals and the previous prime minister and the current crop of ministers that are still running under his banner. These are not Donald Trump problems. These are Trudeau Liberal problems that will continue with Mr. Carney.
Well, and I think you'd see Mr. Carney putting out policies that are going to directly, change those things. When you talk about immigration, he is committed to reducing the immigration numbers. When you talk about housing, he's committed to increasing the housing targets and publicly reporting on that. Mr. Carney recognizes that, maybe the last 9 years put us into a position where we were weakened by what Donald Trump has done, but the policies put in place, as I mentioned, are going to directly fight back against Donald Trump and give us an economy that builds on the progress that we've seen to date and what we need going forward.
Okay, when we come back, I want to talk about the switchers. Who are these people? What is motivating them to consider Mark Carney, not necessarily the Liberal Party, but Mark Carney? I've taken a lot of calls from people who say, if it wasn't for Mark Carney, I'd be voting for the NDP. If it wasn't for Mark Carney, I'd be voting for the Conservatives. But Mark Carney, not the Liberals. Mark Carney. What do you make of that? Kate Harrison here. Nick McRoberts is here. It's our Newsday panel. The switchers. When people call me during Talkback and tell me they're switching their vote, used to vote for the New Democrats, used to vote for the Conservatives, now I'm voting for Carney. They say that. I'm voting for Mark Carney, not the Liberals. I'm voting for Mark Carney, the man. He's more popular than the Liberal Party. What do you make of that? What does that mean? Is it important? What would you say, Kate?
Yeah, well, Mr. Carney has a very impressive CV, particularly for a time that when we are in economic distress. So for a lot of Canadians, they hear that he's been the governor of two central banks. And they feel a sense of comfort that he will be able to course correct on the economy. So I think that is part of the factor in the equation here. He also can't really run, Rob, in this case, on the Liberal team because it's the Trudeau team. So there's been a deliberate effort, I would observe, to make Mark Carney separate and distinct from the very people that have been responsible for governing for the last 9 or 10 years, even though they are one and the same. I do think that, the Liberals are doing an effective job running a front-runner campaign. Mr. Carney is not made available to the media at the same extent that Pierre Poilievre is. They, even during the leadership and in the weeks in between, kept his availability to the public pretty guarded. And so I think that Canadians have an idea of what Mark Carney could be. I think that there's less of an understanding of who he actually is. And he's doing the right thing by saying nice things about the economy and diversification and Canada coming together. We're not really getting into much detail on the substance of what he would do that is a departure from what the Liberals before him have done. And that is where I think Canadians need to be placing their focus. What is that?
I would also say, and I hate to interrupt, but I would also say in an election where more than half the country says they think the country needs a change, the fact that Mark Carney has the Liberals leading in most of the polls would suggest to me the Carney campaign, not the Liberal campaign, I'm saying, the Carney campaign is making a pretty compelling case that he's the agent for change. Nick, just comment there. Just hold on, Kate. Let's hear from Nick here.
Yeah, I think it's all of what Kate has said, I think is correct in terms of what Canadians are looking for. They're looking at that economic CV, that economic experience. and understanding that that's what's needed. I think they also, in Mark Carney, see a bit of an adult in the room in terms of someone that's taking this serious. And I think that's in part to the fact that it's taken so long for the Conservative campaign to pivot slightly. I'll also just quickly say to Kate's point about Canadians remembering the Liberal government, in the regions of the country where the Liberals are leading handily, and I'm thinking of my own Atlantic Canada, and Rob, you are aware of this, there's not a great feeling towards the Conservatives, right? And so what the Liberals have been able to do is point out that they've evolved as a party, that they've got a new leader and they've got a fresh face, and they've been able to have the Conservative record of Stephen Harper in those regions stick a little bit more. And so Canadians are seeing a experienced private sector individual who's not a traditional politician, and then they're seeing, a career politician of Stephen Harper's government in Pierre Poilievre, and obviously they're making their decision known.
Did you want to add one more thing? We have about 30 seconds left, Kate.
Yeah, I think we can't underestimate how a sizable portion of the electorate wants to see not someone who will challenge Donald Trump, but the opposite of Donald Trump. I think that's fueling a lot of the interest in Carney. He is a bureaucratic, technocratic, global person. That is the opposite of Donald Trump. And I think that a lot of sentiment in this election right now is being driven by wanting the opposite of what the Americans chose to elect, as opposed to necessarily having a hard look at Mr. Carney himself.
Interesting points. All around, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks.
We'll speak soon.
Take care.
Okay.
From Hill and Knowlton, that's Nick McRoberts. From Sumo Strategies, Kate Harrison. Talkback right after the news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It is 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today's topic is all the other issues. All the other issues. And here's a question to get the conversation going. What is an issue that you think isn't getting enough attention in this election campaign? What is an issue for you that you think isn't getting enough attention in this election campaign? What is that issue for you? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Our phone lines are open right now. I mean, it's been anything but a normal election campaign because one issue has dominated so much of the discussion and the debate, and that's the Trump issue, the tariff issue. But that is, let's face it, that's far from the only issue facing the country, affecting Canadians, concerning Canadians. There are many issues in this country, and they are varied. They may depend on where you live, or how old you are, or what kind of job you have, or how much money you make. But more than 2 weeks into this election campaign, there's been little discussion about what I would call the other issues. The other issues, many of the issues that we face in this country. So we want to talk about some of those other issues today with your help. Our phone lines, again, open right now. Love to hear from first-time callers. Heard a lot of new voices yesterday, and we would love for that to continue as we ask, what is an issue that you think isn't getting enough attention in the election campaign? 1-833-668-2577. You think of all the other things these political leaders could be talking about, but aren't really talking about because of the Trump factor that's been so influential in the election campaign so far. Healthcare. I mean, the state of healthcare, the future of healthcare, increasing privatization of healthcare. You have a whole show just about healthcare. Traditionally, healthcare has been at the top of any list of the top issues for Canadians. Barely come up. Barely came up during the most recent provincial election campaign in Ontario, which was also dominated by Trump and tariffs. I mean, climate change. How often have you heard climate change? The greatest threat humanity faces is climate change. Wait until it isn't. Now, Consumer carbon tax, gone. Building pipelines, popular idea. Let's build new mines in record time, new roads. What happened to the fight against climate change? Maybe that's an issue for you. I mean, it's an election campaign, so promises abound. All the party leaders want to give you something. They don't want to say how they'll pay for it. What about the country's balance sheet? The national debt is closing in on $1.3 trillion. Your share is $30,000. My share is $30,000. If you have a spouse, their share is $30,000. You have a child, their share is $30,000 too. Is this of concern to you at all? That the national debt is growing by $4.5 million every hour? Retirement security. You know, CUPE, the big public service union's running a fear campaign saying a Poilievre government would take a wrecking ball to your pension. The NDP is claiming the same thing. Poilievre would cut your pension. They offer no proof, but they make the claim nonetheless. Retirement security. Have you heard it come up? Poilievre's going to have a nice pension. Jagmeet Singh's going to have a nice pension. We don't have to pass the hat for Mark Carney. Everyone knows that. He's done very well. Have any of them said anything about the rest of us? How we're going to retire with some dignity? Immigration. Holy smokes. What happened to that as an issue? And we could go on because there are so many issues beyond Trump and tariffs. What's an issue that you think is not getting the attention it deserves in this election campaign? If you can think of one, if something is top of mind for you, just pick up the phone, give us a call. The call-in line, 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, just mention that to Andrea. We'll make your call a priority as we talk about all the other issues that could be talked about in this election campaign. We can talk about it here now on Talkback. Jim in Nova Scotia has called. Hello, Jim.
Hey, Rob. Great intro.
Hey, Jim.
Great intro by you introducing all those topics. I was kind of peacefully sitting in my garage here, cleaning up my cars in the snowstorm, and Dr. Lee came on your program.
Yeah.
And just, you know, he talked about these ginormous, gigantic, you know, hill to die on things. And my background is in biology and agriculture. And the thing is, it's about food security. The demand side management thing is about food security. Just look at the situation the United States is with their eggs. And I don't know the exact where they are today, but let's just say they frigged up their egg supply. You know, there's barns in Iowa, 400,000 chickens in them.
Yeah.
And there's the last time this agreement was negotiated, I was following the agriculture part of it. There's one dairy producer in Wisconsin that can supply Canada with all its milk. Think about it.
Wow.
But it's agribusiness. To my knowledge, there's not a whole lot of family farms. We're not dealing with family farmers. And the ones I saw interviewed during the last free trade agreement, you know, which is being discussed in the most American farmers would love to have our supply side management, but they can't because it's all agribusiness there. You know, so the other thing too is
I have heard this from defenders of supply management that if you were to end supply management, you have to understand it would be the end of the family farm as we know it in Canada. And you would be getting your milk, your eggs, your chicken from big agra in the United States. Is that what you think?
It's non-regulated, right? In Canada, you're familiar with Nova Scotia.
Sure, yeah.
He buys his truck in Truro. And I don't understand Dr. Lee. I don't know where he's going with this, but I would urge your researchers there to line us up his next line of questioning on this. Like, where does food security fit into this big hierarchy of hill to die on? It is a hill to die on.
Food security, security. All right, Jim.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What's an issue you think is not getting the attention it deserves in the election campaign? Mark in Calgary. Thanks for waiting, Mark. You're up next. Hi there, Mark.
Thanks for taking my call, Rob.
You're welcome, Mark.
One of my main issues as a outdoor enthusiast / outdoor professional guide for hunting and sports shooting is the C-21 bill that nobody seems to be talking about anymore. The Trudeau government put that bill forward and made it impossible to buy, sell, or trade handguns or certain rifles, mostly handguns. And I really think there should be more talk about that. I know Raquel Dancho in Manitoba, St. Paul is the only MP really advocating for that I know of, that I've seen. Yeah, it's a huge concern for people who like to hunt and sport shoot and all that stuff.
Okay, what's the concern? What's the concern?
Well, the concern for me is like they're punishing us law-abiding citizens, the vetted ones. I mean, it's not like we can just go buy a gun. You have to have a proper license. You have to be do the proper courses to do it legally. And they're saying that basically it's because of us gun owners. These criminals are stealing registered guns to create crimes, which is a total lie. Guys aren't going to rob stores and banks and stuff with registered guns. They do it with guns that come from the black market, so to speak, right?
Okay.
So that's
so you don't like. So an issue for you is you don't think it's getting enough attention is the Liberal government's gun control measures. They go too far, in your opinion. Yeah.
It's not getting enough attention, and I feel like it's being swept under the rug right now, and they're probably going to make it even worse here, because every time I look at a video online through the House of Commons, they keep talking about taking more rights away from us as gun owners, and that's just not fair in my book.
Okay. All right.
And
Mark,
I know it's
thank
not
you.
just because I'm in Alberta. It's every
Sure.
province.
No. Yeah, I've taken calls from all across the country whenever gun control issues come up. Like our next caller, Paul in Cambridge, has brought that up from time to time, I believe. Paul? Hello, Paul.
On occasion. I was starting to think...
Did you guys collude before the show, or what?
No.
Okay.
I don't know the fella, but I am not a one-issue voter, although that is a very important point to me. Had we had this election back last summer or in the fall, where the NDP had propped up the corrupt Liberal government, we would be talking about completely different things that matter to Canadians. Trump only got elected in November, took power in January, and came up with all these tariffs. Now, the Liberals are just using this as an election issue. The things we need to be talking about are the things that we would have been talking about prior to Trump. Crime, in particular violent crime, home invasions, people kicking in doors armed with illegal handguns, by the way. We've got a drug situation that's just out of control. We got homeless people. The drugs involved there is a major contributor towards the homeless. Not all, but a major contributor. These are the things we should be talking about. We should be talking about the cost of living. We should be talking about the price on food. All the things that the Liberals drove up in the past 9 years. That's what we should be talking about. Trump is just a flash in the pan. He's just taken power, and he's got to try and get all the press he can. Of course, in the U.S., when does a campaign start for the next election? The day you get you're sworn in for this one. So Trump is just trying to draw attention to him. We should be concentrating on what is important to Canada. Violent crime, drugs, homelessness, people lined up at the food banks. That's not the Canada that I grew up in. But nobody wants to talk about that. Yeah.
Gotcha, Paul. Thank you. Well, we want to talk about it. That's why we're doing this show today. The other issues. What's an issue you think is not getting the attention it deserves in the election campaign? We've been talking about the other issues, all the other issues. What's an issue for you that you think is not getting the attention it deserves in this election campaign? Let's face it, Trump and tariffs, that's been the dominant issue. But what's another issue that you think isn't getting enough attention in the election campaign? Orville in Saskatchewan. Orville, thanks for calling. You're on the air. What is that issue for you?
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for taking the call.
You're welcome.
Interprovincial trade barriers.
Okay.
Which the timing of it is pretty important right now, as of course we've got the U.S. Trump tariffs, and what a golden opportunity to expand Canadian business east and west. Saskatchewan and Alberta, wouldn't it be great if their oil could be supplying Quebec and the Irving refinery in New Brunswick?
Sure would be. Yeah. In my opinion. Yeah, it would be. It would be great.
And most recently, if you check something, the latest from Prime Minister Mark Carney, he has some very positive statement about that just most recently, that he wants Quebecers to use oil from Alberta rather than the United States.
Yeah, but he has also said if Quebecers say no, then that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Right?
But then, I've read that too. But then there's another thing he says there that Premier Francis has said Quebec would consider new oil and gas projects. So it almost seems like there's an opportunity that the door is open. I'm not saying that it's the prize, but the door is open.
Well, it's open a crack. I think it's open a crack, right?
It's a start.
Yeah, it's a start. Yeah. Okay. But interprovincial trade it has come up. It has come up. You know, for the Liberals, the point person on that file, it would appear, is going to be Chrystia Freeland. She's kind of in charge of that right now.
Yeah.
Under the Liberals. Nice. But Poilievre is also saying that needs to be done.
Yeah. And when you have this type of discussion happening, and of course, we know that the Conservatives have been talking about this for quite a while, but to have discussion on the Liberal side, even on a small fraction, is an improvement.
Yeah, and it's not just about the trade of goods, but it's also having labor mobility, particularly, when it comes to healthcare, for example, the ability, a doctor is say trained here, licensed here. Shouldn't that be recognized all across the country, for example? Streamlining somehow our labor mobility standards. If they could make progress on that, probably be.
Yeah. And I think there's many more things to make progress on, but seems like Trump is kind of limiting our business to the States. Well, let's go Canada, East and West.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Orville. Good to hear from you today. In Saskatchewan, calling from Saskatchewan today. In Cambridge, Ontario, Dallas on the air. Dallas, what's an issue you think is not getting enough attention in the election campaign?
Well, the very first thing I gotta say is the debt and deficit. I heard you say that we're presently paying $4.5 million an hour, something to that effect.
It's growing by $4.5 million an hour. It grows by $4.5 million an hour.
Right. So that's a big chunk of change, and I wish I had $4.5 million an hour coming in. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I bet you do. I bet you. I only need 1 hour's worth, as a matter of fact.
There you go. Right, and we could all move to a private island.
Yeah.
But we really. I mean, I understand the turmoil. The leaders don't know where the economy is going to end up at the moment. Nobody does at this point, as far as I can see.
Sure.
But that is a major thing. They have to figure out a way to address that particular issue. The other small issue, which the gentleman just spoke about, was the interprovincial trade barriers, of which I have never understood for years. I mean, we all are one country. Why it's taken something of the Trump effect, let's say, to actually turn our heads around and say, why are we fighting against ourselves with these barriers, construction workers, health workers. I know an individual in Fredericton whom she has more letters behind her name than what her name actually spells. But if she was moved to Ontario and try and open a practice, she would need even more letters. And that stuff just does not make any sense to me. It really doesn't.
Right. Yes. So labor mobility, another issue, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there some way that can be standardized, as I say, across the country?
Well,
what progress can be made on that?
If you're qualified, she's qualified in 5 different provinces to do what she does. But every province she moves to, she needs a different qualification.
Right.
And it makes no sense to me. You know? I mean, if you have
doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of
PhD,
people, I
this, you have
suspect.
that. But
Right.
anyway.
All right.
I'll
Good
leave
list.
it at that for today, my friend.
That's good, Dallas. Great to hear from you again today, my friend. Thank you. Russ in High River. Russ, thanks for calling. You're on the air. Russ, what is that issue for you?
The Liberals' history, the last 9 years.
Okay.
Like it's being swept under the table, and they just we're looking. Got to look at this. You got to look at Trump. You got to look at this. But nobody's remembering why we're in such bad shape to start with. It's the last 9 years. Why aren't we talking about it? Because I don't want to, analogy is the Liberal pig has just wiped the lipstick off and put different color on. It's the same party. They're the same people.
Okay.
And
You don't think enough attention is being focused on the Liberal record?
Yeah, there isn't. It's not being talked about. Vassy tried to bring it up in one of her shows, and I can't remember the minister from, I think he's resource minister or something. He says, Vassy, that's in the past. We got to look forward. We can't remember. We shouldn't worry about what was in the past. And Carney never, ever, he himself admitted, he said, well, Trudeau's government didn't do a bad job. So why aren't we discussing that? 'Cause to me, that's the key of this whole election is we're not, if we let him in with the Liberals, we've just wasted how much money on an election.
Okay. You think it should be a referendum on the Trudeau record, and that not enough.
Isn't that what an election
Okay.
is?
Well, I guess as you say, the Liberals would say, well, Mr. Trudeau's not around anymore. He's gone.
Yeah, but it's the same people.
And we've done away with some of his policies. Remember that carbon tax? We canceled that capital gains tax is gone. Okay.
They didn't cancel it. All they did was he said it. We're just going to move it back to the industrial side, and then we're going to cap the oil industry. And we may build a pipeline, but if there isn't a business case, well, today the U.S. announced that they just signed a deal with Korea to ship natural gas out of Alaska across, and Koreans are going to pay for it. What have we got?
Oh, okay. I don't know anything about that. Okay, I got you though. You want to change election. You want to change election. And, the Trump thing has taken over. You want to get Trump out of the election. Okay, fair enough. Let's go to
why we want an election.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Russ. Okay, people are worked up. Let's go to Bernie in Mississauga. Hello, Bernie. What's that issue for you that's not getting enough attention?
I think the biggest thing today is the cost of living. The rents and the housing and the food prices and everything. I think that's the thing that's being ignored in this election because it's being overshadowed by the Trump factor. But when this is all settled down and everything, there are issues that really concern Canadians. What I'm very disturbed at is across this country, from the prairies to Ontario to Quebec to the Maritimes, they got the NDP at 8% in the polls in this day and age, when he's been a champion of the ordinary people for the last 9 years. So that's my opinion.
Okay. Well, why do you think the NDP is struggling so badly, Bernie? Just while I have you here.
It's hard to say. This morning on the CBC, they had Poilievre and Carney on there for about 2 or 3 hours. They had Jugmeat Seat on there for about 5 minutes. So the news media is feeding the theory about Carney being the white knight on the white horse and everything like that. Right. And Poilievre is on his heels and everything like that. So I think it's the news media and the coverage, and I think it's been going on. They learned from George Goebbels in Germany a long time how to brainwash
come on
people.
Now. Stop it. Okay, Bernie, we'll stop our conversation there. But housing affordability, rents, and the cost of housing. Mr. Carney's making a housing announcement right now, repeating his pledge, kind of a re-announcement. I mean, political leaders do this during a campaign. 500,000 housing, wants to double housing construction. Is it achievable to build 500,000 homes a year, 1,400, almost 1,400 homes a day? In Canada, some people are questioning that, whether that's feasible, achievable, doable, realistic, or downright impossible, never going to happen. But that's the promise for today from Mr. Carney. Jared, I believe, is up next in Calgary. Hi, Jared.
Hey.
How
are you doing?
Good.
So
good. Always good.
I noticed a lot of people are touching on the social policies on your last couple days here. I wanted to bring up one social policy here, healthcare, where a lot of liberals are saying they don't want to do away with our public universal health care. But at the same time, we actually have a dual system. It's just not exclusive to the public.
Yeah.
Right? Like our sports athletes, our politicians, and the ultra-rich have their own private health care.
Yeah, it's not even the ultra-rich anymore, sir. Like that horse is out of the barn. Now, I mean, there are private clinics all over the place. There are doctors who have opted out of the public system. They don't want to be part of the public system, and they'll take you on as a patient if you give them $5,000 a year.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And then if you look at all the top-ranked healthcare systems in the world per country, like some of the top 10 have a hybrid system.
Yes.
So, like, why are we, like, we are moving to that. I don't know why people are scared of ditching our old healthcare system.
Well, I mean, it gets, a lot of fear-mongering. You must want American-style healthcare. And when people say that, I often say, well, not necessarily, but can I have France-style healthcare or Swiss-style healthcare? All of these, there are so many countries in the world with, as you say, healthcare systems that have better outcomes than ours, that have dual systems. They have a public system and a private system.
Yeah. And one last thing, I know this is a big thing for social policy, the $10 a day child care.
Yeah.
I don't have anybody in child care, but one thing that I think I would totally go against $10 a day child care is eventually down the road, it's just going to be like our old healthcare system where you're going to have underfunded, overcrowded daycares for kids.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't think these issues are getting enough attention? These kind of more social policy issues, healthcare, childcare. Very interesting. Thank you, Jared. Good call. We'll be right back. It's Talkback. This is News Radio. George. Hi, George.
Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome, George.
Yeah, I'm just wishing to touch on, I think it was Vicky that was just talking about the plastics and so on in the...
Yes.
Yeah, and she was definitely on the environmental side, which is true in its sense there. I don't think they're making the connection between the plastics that breaks down to microplastics that are causing health issues. There was a study that they looked from 2016 to 2024, and what they found that the tissues that contain microplastics concentrations have increased approximately 50% in those 8 years of study, where they were comparing brain, liver, and kidneys, and basically, and from a science perspective, correlation is not causation, right? So, but what's also been noticed is that we've been starting to get an increase in dementia, and basically the microplastic levels in the brain tissues increased about 50% over those last 8 years, and it's not everybody in this world. There's nobody that doesn't have microplastics in their body now.
Not by now, I suppose. Yeah, but do you think there should be more discussion about this? That's the question of the day.
I mean, there has to be a a discussion because obviously when we have health issues, that's going to be there's an increase in costs and so on that aspect. I think that's going to be very, very low on the priority list.
Right.
So,
well, yeah, right now. Sure it is. Sure it is.
Yeah.
But I bring that up because, when I was talking with Professor Lee about an hour ago, it's in the U.S. Trade Representative Report. This is a trade irritant. They don't like that we have single-use plastic bans in Canada.
Yeah.
In their report, it's one of the things they're complaining about. It's why they're hitting us with tariffs.
Yeah.
Imagine. It's crazy.
Oh, for sure. And if I may, just because you touched on the supply management, and I know that has been discussed and so on, I would love if you could ever have a conversation. I don't know this professor, but Professor Bruce Muirhead. He's out of the University of Waterloo. I'm in Calgary, obviously.
Okay.
NRI. I think there's a misconception what the supply management system works, how it works. And they do, and what Dr. Lee was incorrect, they do a comparison to deregulated like the UK and in comparisons. So it's not like our milk or our eggs is also in that supply management. That goes back. Right?
Eggs, poultry, dairy. Yeah.
So
okay.
Anyhow,
okay. Look, we're gonna have to wrap it up there, Bruce. That's it for hour number 1 of Talkback. Thank you for your call. Thank you for all your calls. A full hour just ahead. So if you're on the line, hang on. We'll get right to you after the latest breaking news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
We've been talking today about all the other issues and what you think is an issue that's not getting the attention it deserves in the election campaign, an election campaign 2 weeks in that has been dominated by Donald Trump and tariff news. 1-833-668-2577. Jen is up next in Calgary. Hello, Jen.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Jen. What's that issue for you, do you think?
Yeah, so for myself, I think it's understanding the speed of which we're able to access the services that we pay for. So, for example, the government, in my understanding, is twice the size that it was, 10 years ago. But when I try to access things like CRA, for example, I have a daughter who has autism, and I applied for the DTC credit. It took me a year to get approved. They delayed it and asked for, additional information, like proving that she had autism since birth. Just really slowed things down. And then I spent a year waiting for that approval, and now I'm coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the approval, and I'm still waiting to be essentially back paid, so I can get her some testing and stuff that's needed. But there's a progress bar online that you can watch, and I've maxed out the progress bar. The date has switched, and now it shows, not available. Like there's no timeline for it.
Right.
It takes so long to access the things that we need. But when you call the government, I will say they answer the phone like in a relatively reasonable time, but it feels like there's nobody in the back doing what they're supposed to be doing.
I see. Okay. So, for example, during the Trudeau years, the 9+ years that Mr. Trudeau was in power, the size of the civil service grew by 43%.
Yeah.
The population grew by 15%. The number of people working for the government grew by 43%, from 257,000 to 367,000. My goodness. You're wondering where's the corresponding improvement in public services, such as accessing help for your child, right?
Yeah. Productivity.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah. Productivity. Yeah. Great one. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I should add, if there's going to be some kind of rationalization, what will that mean for the delivery of public services after all of this growth? Will those wait times be longer? Very good question, Jen. Thank you. Francine up next in Calgary. Hi, Francine.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Thanks for
Hi.
taking my call.
My pleasure.
I just wanted to say, I think there are two things that aren't being talked about. Number one being Mark Carney's trustability, and number two is Mark Carney's connection to China. Everything from plagiarism, working for Brookfield when the decision was made to move to Brookfield to Trump's hometown in New York and then lying about it, placing his assets in Bermuda to avoid paying taxes. And for the environmental concerns that some of your callers have had, like Brookfield has had $93,663 million fines for violations, with the top violation being $55 million in 54 different environmental.
And you don't think enough attention has been given to this issue? Mark Carney, his time at Brookfield, all of these issues, because there has been a lot of media coverage of these issues. Certainly, Mr. Poilievre, my goodness, Mr. Poilievre just ripped into Mark Carney today and his record at Brookfield and called him a crony capitalist and everything. You don't think, is this an off the radar thing? Because it seems to be very much on the radar, his time at Brookfield.
But if you look at Brookfield having bought the biggest pipeline in the U.S. for $9 billion, like that deal did not just happen. And then when you look at the bigger picture, that Mr. Carney's connection to China, visiting China weeks before being parachuted in, and he also went to China in October of 2024 while advising Justin Trudeau. And that may explain why Mark Carney refused to fire Paul Chang, who finally resigned. But the candidate who's replaced him has a strong connection to the Communist
But how do you know all this unless it's in, people are talking about it, it's in the news media, there's stories about it, what have you?
Well, it's not in mainstream media. Mr. Carney has promised to boost CBC, which they reported that CBC is underfunded.
Well, that was all over the news media, but he did a whole news conference about that.
Well,
about how he thought the CBC was so important and I would increase their funding and all this stuff.
But look at their take on the latest story about the WeChat in China, and CBC reported that Mr. Carney is being targeted. That's what their headline said. When I suspect the Communist Party may be trying to help Mr. Carney get elected. Coincidentally.
Well, yeah, there are some questions about, I have my own questions about how that whole story was reported. Was he targeted or was
he being helped?
Or boosted? Speaking of in, positive terms, to help him in the election campaign. That's a valid point. Again, but you think we should know a lot more about Mark Carney, his background, his record, than we know at this point of the election campaign. Is that fair enough?
Well, especially his conflicts of interest, which are hidden in the blind trust.
Yeah, I would say much has been made of that. I would say much has been made of that. Thank you though for your call. I do appreciate your call today, Francine. Good to hear from you in Calgary today. We will stop here. Hour number 2 is underway. There are lines available as we talk about all the other issues. So many issues. Al in Kitchener up next. Al, hi there, Al.
Hi, Rob. Thank you very much for taking my call.
My pleasure, Al.
Rob, I'm an 80-year-old senior, so I got some Alzheimer issues, right?
Okay.
But I really think that our country, that there's an Alzheimer pandemic.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
I think everybody's forgotten about the scandals of this governing party that we have.
Okay.
Do you follow me? Anyway,
Yes, I follow you. Yes.
Like Carney's picking up all these policies from Mr. Polyev. And
yes.
I don't know if you remember when, they're trying to make it like a Trump issue, right, for this election.
Oh, sure.
But anyway, when they had
it is a big issue. I'm not saying it's not a big issue. It's a big issue. You're in Kitchener. I mean, all around you is the auto sector. I mean, it's very difficult right now for people in the auto sector right now. 12,000 people are out of a job right now because of these tariffs. They're just out of a job. But not just the Stellantis people, 4,000 people working there, but all of those people who work for those parts companies, they're off the job.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I think what is happening is they're trying to make us forget about all these problems that they had, the Liberals.
Right. Okay.
You remember when they had the coronation? I watched it on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And when they had the coronation of Mr. Carney as Prime Minister, he's not our Prime Minister. He's a Liberal leader of the Liberal Party, as far as I'm concerned. He hasn't been elected.
Sure. Well, he's running for Prime Minister now, so.
Yeah.
Right.
So they had Mr. Chrétien on, and he said Mr. Trump should get a medal, with tongue-in-cheek, right, for uniting the country. Well, what he failed to say was that for all these years, the Liberals have divided our country, the English against the French and the East against the West.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right?
But yeah, one of many ways they've divided the deal. Those are two ways they divided the country,
Yeah.
Young against old.
I've just had to pay a bill again today, one of my gas bills.
Yeah.
On the back again, they got the carbon tax yet. They're still paying that, right? I know they've taken it off the gas, but I just had it on my... And my last bill was over $50 carbon tax, and the one before that. The only reason why they're taking it off now is because Mr. Polyev said that we should axe the tax.
Right.
It's all about paying for votes.
Paying for votes. Okay. Yeah. But you think the election should be more about the Liberal record, maybe less about Trump and tariffs. Yeah.
Because Mr. Carney was his advisor, Trudeau's advisor for the last so many years.
All right, Al.
And
Thank you, Al.
All the same old baggage in Ottawa and the Liberal Party that they've had for the last 9 or 10 years.
Okay.
Like, if you want to name names, like Sean Fraser screwed up immigration, then he was going to get out because you want to spend time with.
Yeah, well, he was with housing. Mark Miller was the immigration minister. But look, I've got to run. We're very busy today. But I thank you so much, Al. Very good points all the way around. So look, I just want to give you an update about what is happening with the markets. This was the big rebound day for the markets. I mean, at one point today, the Dow was up 1,200, 1,300 points. All the markets were higher. Some of them are starting to surrender their gains now, or they're kind of back to break even. I mean, the Dow is still up, but it's 1,000 points off of its high. The S&P 500 is, just hanging in there. The NASDAQ is barely higher right now, and the Toronto Stock Exchange main index, TSX, is actually in negative territory. This is all about the U.S. and China and tariffs. And as of now, China is going to be hit with 104% tariffs, according to the update from the White House press secretary just moments ago, Caroline Leavitt. David, can you play that, please?
Yes, thank you. You mentioned the 70 countries or so. I'm curious, though, under what conditions at this point would President Trump talk to President Xi about tariffs?
Look, I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that Xi and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
So China has to call first?
The Chinese want to make a deal. They just don't know how to do it, but the president will be implementing these 104% tariffs on China tonight.
So the big stock rally that had been happening today, this has kind of sucked the life out of that. And as I say, I mean, it's not a bloodbath or anything. It's just not the big rally that it was earlier in the day. And I would just note oil price has a 5 in front of it right now. So that's the West Texas U.S. price, $59.75 U.S. a barrel. Be right back. What is an issue you think is not getting the attention it deserves in the election campaign? Guy in Calgary up next. Hello, Guy.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. What is that for you?
I would like to see it slow down on the immigration.
Immigration. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Until we have hospitals and schools that can handle it. The housing thing is another problem, but the main thing I think is the hospitals. I'm a fourth generation Canadian on one side and the third on the other side. Our family's been paying taxes to pay for these hospitals and schools for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And my son can't get a family doctor.
Right.
And I think that's a concern to a lot of people that they can't get health care, or if they do go into emergency, they got to wait 8 or 10 hours to get in.
Sure. Plus, how fair is it to say new Canadians, people arriving here, they can't find a place to live, or they can't find a job, or they don't have it's just adding to the situation, the strain on the school system, their language issues, whatever. Access to healthcare. We want people to come here and thrive. And
yes, absolutely.
Right. And, inadequate housing, inadequate employment, inadequate education, inadequate access to healthcare is not really setting up people for success, is it?
No,
this shouldn't even be controversial.
No,
this is
they're bringing these people in, which I don't have a problem with if you can handle it.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But when,
I know exactly what you mean, sir.
Like my son is 5th generation Canadian here, and he can't get a family doctor.
Right. And whether they're a fifth, whether your family has been here 300 years or an hour and a half, the situation with healthcare is pretty dire, right now.
Well, I agree with you in one point, but
the healthcare system, let's face it, wasn't firing on all cylinders 10 years ago either, sir.
No,
right?
That's right.
Before this took office as an issue.
But it's just you bring too many people.
It has certainly contributed, I would say, to the worsening of the healthcare system.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But to the point, 2 weeks in, what have we really heard about the issue? Not very much.
Not very much. And
right?
It's like Paul, I can't remember where he came from, PEI or somewhere, that called in earlier today, the older fella.
From Orville, maybe from Kitchener. Yeah. From Kitchener. Yeah.
Okay. He's right. The Liberals have made this about Trump, and he's only here for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And with the tariffs, we don't know how long the tariffs will be here. And do we have a certain amount of tariff certainty right now? Hard to say, given, Trump could wake up tomorrow in an angry mood. Who knows? He just slapped 104% tariff on China. Who knows what's going to happen?
We can't control him.
Yes. Very good point. Very good point. Yeah. Thank you, Guy. Yeah. Good to hear from you, sir. I mean, this is along the lines of an editorial that's in the Globe and Mail today that basically says the Carney campaign is assuming that it can cruise to victory on this single issue of Trump. And I mean, so far that's proven to be true. I mean, think about it, from certain to defeat to quite possibly 3 weeks away from a majority government, all because of Trump and tariffs. And the Globe, in an editorial today, says shouldn't be allowed to happen because the country faces a lot more issues than just the person in the White House. The headline for the editorial actually is, "Let the real election campaign finally begin." Let me just read a little bit here. Just a couple of paragraphs. We'll read the whole thing. There could be a lot of buyer's remorse among those who strategically cast their lot with the Liberals, only to discover afterward that important issues they care about are not on the agenda of a government they felt such an urgent need to vote for. What would Mr. Carney do if elected? It goes on. Would he support a trans-Canadian gas and oil pipeline? Or would he raise the cost of pollution? Would he reduce other spending to pay for his tax cuts? What would he sacrifice to get to Canada's defense spending target, 2% of GDP, as he promises to do by 2030? Would his catalytic conversions actually work? Will housing get built? Will the immigration system be fixed? These questions aren't getting asked enough by a public focused on Mr. Trump's rhetoric and actions. But here's the thing. Mr. Trump's great Liberation Day has come and gone, and Canada is still standing. Canadian voters now have the breathing room to think beyond the single issue that has dominated the campaign to date and start asking broader questions. The election is not over. Far from it. This is in the Globe and Mail today. I mean, there was a time when that was a very red newspaper, basically the official newspaper of the Laurentian elite. It still has its moments, but maybe not the red Laurentian elite newspaper it used to be. Be right back. I'm Rob Snow. We're talking about all the other issues in the election campaign. What is deserving of some attention, in your opinion?
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Right back to the phones. Deborah in Alberta. Hello, Deborah. Hi, Deborah. Hello, Deborah. No, Deborah. Okay, let's go from Deborah to Debbie in Calgary. Let's try Debbie in Calgary. Hello, Debbie.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Debbie.
I wanted to bring up seniors.
Nobody
seems to be mentioning much about seniors.
Right.
I don't know if you know, but if you retire at 65, the maximum OAS CPP combined payment you will get is about $2,067 a month, and that's the maximum.
Okay.
Now, there's a guaranteed income supplement that you can apply for, but not if you make over $24,000 a year. I mean, $24,000 a year.
$24,000 a year. Wow. Holy smokes.
To live on.
Yeah.
So, and now with the tariffs.
And how much would I'm sorry, Deb. How much would that be? Guaranteed income supplement. How much would you collect on something like that, do you figure?
I don't know because I don't
qualify. Idea? No. Yeah, you don't qualify, so you don't know. Okay. No. Yeah, I don't know either. So, okay. Just curious.
I mean, there's a lot of seniors out there that maybe have RRSPs and whatnot, but there's a lot who don't. There's a lot that live paycheck to paycheck for basically their whole lives.
A lot of seniors are going back to work.
They need to be considered. Oh,
right.
Yeah. I have a friend, she's 68, she had to go back to work. And I think we're not recognizing the how we're treating our seniors.
Okay.
You know, they put in their time, and I think they deserve to live a little more comfortably than $24,000 a year.
Right. Okay.
And maybe if Polly had tackled that, more seniors would be switching to conservative and not voting Liberal.
Yeah, he did make an announcement on seniors. Something about seniors. I can't. It was for working seniors, I believe.
Oh,
Can't remember the exact announcement, though. Yeah, Mr. Poilievre is proposing increase the tax-free earnings threshold for working seniors. Under the current system, basic personal amount that can be earned tax-free for all Canadians is $15,705. For seniors, the threshold would be topped up by an additional $8,700, almost $8,800 through an age amount credit. Okay, that's how it currently, under the conservative plan, the basic personal amount for working seniors would increase, allowing them to earn up to $34,000 tax-free, about $10,000 more than under the current system. So he has made one announcement about seniors issue. 1 in 5 seniors 65 to 74 are working, according to StatsCan.
And so what about the other 4?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I don't need. I get a little bit back each year from income tax. And the other thing is, for a senior, when you retire, if you are, and I say this facetiously, lucky enough to be getting a death benefit because your partner has passed, they cut it in half.
Right.
When you retire.
Right.
It makes no sense to me. Anyway, that's what I think should be tackled.
You want to see more attention paid to seniors issues.
Absolutely. And now with the tariffs, it's going to be harder and harder to make.
Yeah, and just everything being politics and strategy coming into it, they're losing the senior vote right now. The conservatives are behind the liberals right now. Why not maybe a more robust plan?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, maybe. Agree. Yeah, Debbie, very good point.
I don't get a discount when I go to the grocery store, or when I go fill up my car or anything like that.
Right. All right, Debbie, thank you for throwing that into the mix. Good to hear from you on that. John in Kincardine. John, you're up next, John. What's an issue you think isn't getting the attention it deserves in the election, John?
Well, Rob, your 3 previous callers stole some of my thunder, but I'm going to try and tie it all in together. Certainly the immigration, and if we get some sort of a hold on that, I think that would tie into some of the crime and certainly some of the healthcare issues that we have across the province. But if I could switch things from the 3 previous callers to my issue about crime, and I guess specifically repeat criminals. Mm-hmm. It may not be as big an issue in our rural parts of our country, but especially in Eastern Canada. But I firmly believe that there's a group of criminals who know they will get only a slap on the wrist. And this is what bothers me, especially in that Greater Toronto area, because, we're in Kincardine here. We're about 3 hours away, I guess, from Toronto in that respect. But it's a huge problem. To me, it seems like a rotting apple in a barrel. And our federal government is going to have to tackle this sooner or later. Every day in the GTA, there's so many home invasions. And these criminals, they'll branch out. They'll come to areas. I see it. I left Kitchener-Waterloo about 8 or 10 years ago now to move up to Kincardine. But it's so evident in Kitchener-Waterloo area, and now it's coming this way as well.
Okay.
So these criminals, knowing they get a small slap on the wrist, end up going where the money is, and we have quite a nice population who get pensions from the Bruce nuclear plant up here, and some of those criminals are heading this way, from what I've seen in the newspapers.
So you would like to hear you would like to hear more about law and order, crime and punishment, the justice system.
I agree with, and I think it's all tied into, not all of it, but directly or indirectly tied into immigration as well. And we've seen that certainly in the car thefts in that Brampton and Mississauga, in that GTA area.
All right. Thank you for your call, John. Glad we could fit you in. Time to fit a couple of more calls in, but we'll have to stop here. We'll get right to your call next on Talkback as we talk about all those other issues. Long list of them today, that's for sure. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What's an issue for you that you don't think is getting enough attention in the election campaign? Andre in Kitchener. Hi, Andre.
Yes, hi, Rob.
Hi, Andre.
So the fellow was saying earlier that's been there for a long time, and this is one of the reasons why I called our magic Poiliev polka dot rabbit jackrabbit. He said that he wanted hard and stiffer sanctions a couple years ago, right? And that was one of his strong things. Just like a drink and driver, it happens too many times before in crime and all that stuff. So he believes in that. I haven't really heard it with the liberals, so that's to answer that question.
Okay.
The reason why I wanted to get in is the subject today is I haven't heard about it, but I hear it from women all the time. Is everything to them is about like menopause, menstruation, mental, all that stuff. So I think Poiliev should put a little bit of magic and cut the pink tax. What do you think?
Cut the what? Sorry?
The pink tax, woman products.
Oh, cut taxes on like feminine hygiene products and whatnot.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. Yeah, not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about it. Yeah. I mean, certainly, we talked about this yesterday, the gender divide in the election. I don't know if that would be enough to win him over, whether it would be seen as some kind of stunt or whatever. Not a bad idea, Andre.
Take care.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andre. Okay. I find it interesting. David Coletto of Abacus Data was doing some polling recently. I think, David, you talked about it. And he noticed that Trump was a big issue, obviously, but it wasn't the top issue. It was up there. It was second on the list, but reducing the cost of living was number one on the list. Third was growing the economy. Fourth was making housing more affordable. Fifth was improving the healthcare system. Debt and deficit made the list. So was national unity, keeping Canada united. Ethics in government. People were mentioning that. Support for Ukraine. Reconciliation, though, has really dropped off the list, and nobody brought that up today. Last on the list. Reconciliation. But it varies by generation, which is something we talked a little bit about yesterday, the generational divide among the voters. For boomers, Trump is the major concern. It is the big worry, and it's the big worry by a wide margin. But for Gen Z, pocketbook. It's all about affordability.
Pocketbook. If I may, there's a very simple, in my opinion, there is a very simple explanation for that.
Yeah.
If you're under a certain age, you see all of this news about the stock market crashing, and it fundamentally doesn't affect you because you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have a portfolio.
Right.
But if you take somebody who's a couple years from retirement, that stock market crashing is going to legitimately keep you up at night and has a real bearing on what your standard of living is going to be for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Gen Z, Trump was actually a distant third in what's the big issue for people of Gen Z? A distant third behind cost of living and housing affordability, and a distant second for millennials. Cost of living, again, number one issue. So it's interesting to see how this is playing out in the election campaign, and we'll be back. We'll talk about it some more tomorrow. They talk about housing again tomorrow as well. It's been a very busy news day. There's a lot to bring you up to date on. From the hustings and beyond, the latest breaking news is coming up next here on News Radio.